I based it on that, and I wrote the script and sold the script, and then I got fired. And
Although The Breakfast Club is widely regarded as the ideal teen film, there is one scene that shows it wasn't quite that way. A mistake was made in 1985 that was missed by every editor, producer, and viewer of the final cut. The strangest aspect isn't even the fact that it involves Claire's lipstick and something that shouldn't be feasible. The same is true for Brian's pivotal scene in the whole movie. You'll be shocked at what he kisses at the end. The name of the movie that became a cultural sensation was nearly entirely different. In order to envision a group of students who convened during their lunch break rather than Saturday detention, John Hughes initially titled his script The Lunch Bunch. That changed when he learned about the Breakfast Club, a legitimate detention program at Winnetka, Illinois' New Trier High School. By 1982, over 200 students were riding through those early Saturday sessions annually, and the word had been used by the students there since the mid-1970s. Hughes instantly altered his title since he enjoyed the name's genuine sound. He clarified in a 1985 Rolling Stone interview that the Breakfast Club sounded more formal, more like a term that young people would genuinely use. At a cost of $15,000, Universal decided to throw away all of the original Lunch Bunch promotional materials, a move that paid off when the new movie became one of the most famous in movie history. The script was written by Hughes amid one of Hollywood's most notable creative explosions, according to many. He secluded himself in his Lake Forest, Illinois, home office from February 14 to February 16, 1982, and penned not one, but 2 whole screenplays. He filled 312 handwritten pages in a marathon that was powered by 47 glasses of coffee and only 6 hours of sleep. As he wrote, he listened to the same Bruce Springsteen record, Nebraska, 23 times in a row because he thought it helped him depict the angst of adolescence. Despite the late hour, he called his agent Michael Ovitz as soon as he finished The Breakfast Club on February 16th at 3:47 a.m. 87% of the dialogue in the finished movie was taken straight from that first draft. Since Universal initially didn't think a story created so fast could work, they approved 16 Candles as his directorial debut. However, The Breakfast Club finally made its theatrical debut in 1985, bringing in over $51 million and launching the Brat Pack generation's careers. The story's authenticity stemmed from Hughes' own traumatic high school experience. During his junior year at Glenbrook North High School in Northbrook, Illinois, where he attended from 1966 to 1970, Hughes had 14 individual Saturday detentions for offenses such as talking back to teachers, smoking in the restroom, and arriving late. Despite maintaining a 3.8 GPA, he discreetly battled anxiety related to college applications. These difficulties served as the inspiration for Brian Johnson's character. In a 1986 interview with the Chicago Sun-Times, Hughes even acknowledged that he had considered suicide in his senior year due to social isolation. Brian's heartbreaking scene in the movie, where he wants to commit himself because of a failing grade, was influenced by such confession. Between 1980 and 1984, Hughes paid each of the more than 150 teens he interviewed $25 to make sure his script seemed authentic, to explain their educational experiences. Additionally, he drew on his meticulous high school writings, which included discussions and social dynamics that were eventually featured in the movie, virtually word for word. What started out as a straightforward comedy about detention quickly developed into a profound psychological analysis of teenagers. Food battles and escape attempts had been the main topics of Hughes' initial 47-page treatment. However, after speaking with child psychologist Dr. Ellen Rosenberg, who introduced him to the idea of identity versus role confusion from developmental psychology by Erik Erikson, his course was altered. Hughes heard a presentation on the social production of teen identity at a conference held at Northwestern University in November 1983. He added the confessional scenes in the now famous circle, seen as a result of these influences. Motivated by actual group therapy methods he had seen at a teen counseling center in the suburbs, This more serious approach was initially opposed by Universal executives. "This is too hefty for our target audience," even studio boss Tom Mount stated in a memo. Hughes, however, battled to preserve his vision. With feedback from 3 different psychologists, the script underwent 7 significant alterations, growing from 47 to 89 pages, until the emotional impact we witness on screen was achieved. The casting procedure nearly resulted in a completely different movie. John Cusack was first cast as John Bender. Molly Ringwald disclosed at the 40th anniversary reunion in 2025. He made several trips between Chicago and Los Angeles for the lengthy audition process. He was first selected by Hughes over Judd Nelson in the final round. However, Hughes and producer Ned Tannen ultimately determined that Cusack lacked the commanding presence required for the part. This was unexpected because, at the time, Cusack was the bigger star. The decision to replace Cusack was even the more surprising because Hughes had flown him in for a significant screen test, according to casting director Jackie Birch. Molly Ringwald was initially offered the part of the reclusive basket case, Allison Reynolds. However, after reading the screenplay, she developed a closer bond with Claire, who was still known as Kathy Douglas at the time. Ringwald vigorously advocated for the move, vying for the role against Laura Dern, Diane Lane, Jodie Foster, and Robin Wright. Prior to Hughes renaming her Claire, the character was very different, as evidenced by early drafts found in 2015. Later on, Ringwald said that she detested the original moniker, claiming that Claire had the poised demeanor required for the Queen Bee of Shermer High, while Kathy felt like the name of a chubby girl. Her performance became one of the most iconic in teen film as a result of that adjustment. In addition, Emilio Estevez almost portrayed Bender rather than Andrew. Estevez was first cast by Hughes as the rebellious troublemaker, but he was shifted to the role of wrestler Andrew Clark after they couldn't find a credible actor for the character. It was a wise choice. In the pivotal sequence where Andrew admits to taping another student's buttocks together to impress his father, Estevez brought both violence and vulnerability. Other options are as unexpected. Although he wasn't yet well known, Nicolas Cage was given significant consideration for Bender, but the studio couldn't pay him. Another person who tried out was Alan Ruck, who went on to star in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Either option would have fundamentally altered the movie's tone. Rick Moranis, who had been chosen as Carl the janitor, was possibly the most bizarre casting choice. Moranis' goal of giving the character a humorous Russian accent was in direct opposition to Hughes' grounded realism philosophy. He was sacked by producer Ned Tannen, who replaced him with John Capillos. The janitor moments with Judd Nelson required more emotional depth, which Capillo's nuanced portrayal provided, making certain that the movie stayed realistic rather than cartoonish. The Breakfast Club debuted in Los Angeles on February 7, 1985. It appeared to be a low-key, almost routine occasion, but 8 days later, on February 15th, when the movie was released nationwide, it would explode into one of the decade's most significant cultural shocks. The film was shot in a closed high school in Des Plaines, Illinois, between March and May of 1984, and then worked in post-production for about a year. John Hughes refined every aspect throughout that period. However, the studio wasn't certain that it had a hit. Universal held the premiere with little fanfare and little publicity, treating the movie as though it were a modest release. A few industry professionals even left the screening with no idea how to interpret it. Nobody there could have predicted that, with a $1 million budget, this straightforward tale of 5 detained teens would end up earning $51.05 million. That was a return of over 5,000%, a phenomenon that characterized a generation swiftly emerged from what had begun with minimal fanfare. Universal had misjudged its own capabilities. The movie was only given a modest marketing budget by the studio, and it was only supposed to be shown in a select few cinemas. They appeared certain that it would go away in a few weeks. This was unexpected because the previous year, John Hughes had already achieved success with 16 Candles. The thought of a 97-minute film featuring 5 students conversing in a library with minimal action and no spectacular stunts made executives uncomfortable. Because Hughes was still an unproven director, producer Andy Mayer recalled that there were immediate red signals when he first contacted the company. However, the first week disproved everyone's assumptions. The Breakfast Club immediately generated over $5 million in revenue. It became the most talked about movie of the year and made 50 times its production cost. Another unforeseen result of the movie's success was the Brat Pack. 4 months after the publication, on June 10, 1985, journalist David Blum contributed an essay to New York Magazine. At first, it was only supposed to be about Emilio Estevez. However, the focus shifted after Blum spent a night at the Hard Rock Cafe with Estevez, Rob Lowe, Judd Nelson, and others. Blum came up with the phrase Brat Pack after hearing a friend joke about following Grace Jones around. The performers were portrayed negatively in the story, which used anonymous sources to call them haughty and unprofessional. Since the poem was published just 18 days prior to the publication of St. Elmo's Fire, the timing was remarkable. A moniker that persisted for decades was abruptly applied to what had formerly been a group of youthful, up-and-coming stars. Emilio Estevez dropped a planned collaboration with Andrew McCarthy called Young Men with Unlimited Capital because he felt so deceived. The moniker was both a boon and a bane for the actors. It made it more difficult for them to be taken seriously, but it also locked them into pop culture history. On the other hand, critics realized right once that The Breakfast Club was unique. It was widely hailed as John Hughes' seminal work. This movie truly respected the feelings of young people in contrast to the cheesy teen comedies that had previously been released. Reviewers were impressed by the film's ability to dispel misconceptions. According to Andy Meyer, the characters initially resembled stock types. The athlete, the brain, and the basket case. The criminal princess, however, they became actual individuals in a matter of minutes. The screenplay's smart writing caught the attention of critics. Audiences were aware of them by the time the students entered the library. Time magazine gave the movie high marks for capturing real teenage voices without ever patronizing them. 68% of spectators gave the film a score of 8 to 10 on rating websites, demonstrating how quickly it struck a chord with its audience. However, the crew and actors were enduring harsh circumstances behind the scenes. The library set was located upstairs, where temperatures reached 110 degrees due to the intense lighting. Actors frequently dozed off in between takes because they were so worn out. In order to keep them awake, 2 additional assistant directors were employed. A number of continuity issues were introduced into the final cut as a result of the heat. The most well-known error concerns Claire's lipstick. Carefully slips it on, replaces the cap, and tucks it into her purse. However, the lipstick has inexplicably made its way back to her hands in the very next picture, forcing her to put it away once more. The library clock is the source of another mistake. Its hands leap ahead and backward between scenes during the movie. Additionally, it completely vanishes during Claire's staircase dance before reappearing later to indicate a different period. The moving clock was particularly noticeable because the entire drama took place on a single Saturday. Even now, fans continue to point out more errors. Between shots, Brian's hand moves in a way that is physically impossible on Andrew's face during his agonizing admission of the wrestling joke. Claire's hair alternates between being flat and puffy throughout the poignant group scene on the floor, as if she had undergone multiple makeovers during a single chat. Additionally, Bender is able to set down Claire's cosmetics with his right hand in one scene while simultaneously using his left hand in another. The earring paradox, as fans have dubbed it, is among the most bizarre errors in the movie. It appears that Bender wears the diamond earring that Claire only gives him at the very end of the jail day. The truth was less enigmatic than the long-held belief that the film had somehow entered into a time loop. All along, Bender had been wearing an ear cuff. The cuff fastened on the outside of his ear, unlike a pierced earring. The reason for all the misunderstanding was that it appeared nearly identical to the diamond earring from some perspectives. You can see that he is still wearing the cuff when Claire gives him the actual diamond piece in the last shot. Until meticulous frame-by-frame analyses showed what was actually occurring, that little tidbit was sufficient to ignite decades of fan speculations about hidden subplots. Another incident that baffled keen-eyed spectators was when Bender slithered through the drop ceiling of the library. As he walks, his wallet chain dangles, but something seems strange. He can be seen chatting and moving his lips in one picture. His mouth is motionless in the very next image, where he is crawling in the opposite direction. Additionally, the chain seems to switch sides. Film specialists then stated that a technique known as a flip shot was the cause. To save time and money, the crew simply reversed the image rather of reshooting. At the 328 mark, the YouTube channel really even made fun of the idea of reshooting when it's possible to simply flip the image and utilize it again. Although it was a brilliant shortcut, the picture it produced was impossible. Where the $1 million budget for the film is evident, as his chains appear to be on both sides of his body simultaneously. An emotional blunder that many viewers missed the first time is also concealed in the ending. As though proud of the lines he has written, Brian gives the paper a gentle kiss after finishing the group's essay for Principal Vernon. However, the page he kisses is entirely blank in the image selected for the final cut. He had previously been seen writing on several sheets in previous sequences, but this take must have used a new prop. According to film experts, multiple takes of the same scene were captured on camera, and the editors unintentionally used the blank paper take in the final cut. The error becomes more apparent when you consider that the title of the movie and its main message are taken from Brian's article, signed "Sincerely Yours, The Breakfast Club." Another slip occurred so fast during the lunch scene that it nearly seems otherworldly. Eating sushi is a subdued method for Claire to demonstrate her wealthier upbringing than the others. Although her left hand is lying on the table, it abruptly appears close to her head without any discernible movement in between shots as soon as Bender makes fun of her for it. It appears as though her hand teleports because it occurs in less than 2 seconds. Editors combining response photos from many takes was probably the reason. She failed to observe that her hand was positioned differently. The abrupt shift in hand placement became more noticeable to anyone watching because the action is primarily about dialogue and facial expressions. Additionally, it is mentioned that during the movie, Bender's gloves change from black thread to black leather. However, there isn't any precise material regarding it in contrast to the other errors. While some fans maintain that the alteration exists, others contend that it has been mistaken for other costume-related problems. Due to the film's limited budget and production timeline, wardrobe errors would have been frequent. However, this one is still unconfirmed in the primary continuity error databases in the absence of frame-by-frame evidence. These minor mistakes weren't the only issues on the set behind the cameras. Judd Nelson's method acting caused serious problems around the age of 25. Even when the cameras weren't rolling, he continued to play Bender. As his character did on TV, he frequently teased and bothered Molly Ringwald, who was only 17 years old. She had previously collaborated with director John Hughes on 16 Candles, and he was protective of her. Nelson's actions infuriated him so much that he nearly fired him. Later, Ringwald claimed that she didn't take it personally and that she knew what Nelson was doing. However, the setting was unpleasant due to the age difference and ongoing conflict. Hughes never collaborated with Nelson again because he took it so seriously. Also made it difficult to distinguish between acting in real life when he interacted with real high school pupils close to the shooting site. He even purchased beer for minors, according to later reports. This was not only improper at age 25, but it was also against the law. He justified it as a matter of maintaining his integrity. In actuality, though, he had gone beyond what an actor should never do. In addition to the incidents involving actual students, Ringwald's harassment raised serious questions about the casual way the set was being administered. Another significant issue was the actual location of the filming. The majority of the story takes place in a set that was constructed inside a school gymnasium rather than a genuine library. Upstairs temperatures frequently increased between 95 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit because of the intense lighting employed for the pictures. The youthful cast members were so hot that they kept passing out and even snoring during sequences after they had fallen asleep. Tom Del Ruth, a cinematographer, recalled how frequently this damaged sound occurs. Producers recruited 2 additional assistant directors to keep watch upstairs and wake up unconscious performers before they ruined audio recordings since the issue got that bad. Although it was an odd approach, it demonstrated the dangers of the situation. At one time, Hughes decided to let Nelson leave because he had had enough of his actions. In a shocking turn of events, however, the other members of the cast intervened to save him. "We need to get him laser-focused," Ali Sheedy told the group as she organized what she called a powwow. He was kept even by Ringwald, who had been the object of his actions. "I really wanted Judd in that portion," she stated afterwards. No one else understood that section as well as he did. Hughes was persuaded to retain him on by their efforts. Ultimately, the choice made by the cast reflected the plot of the film, a group of outsiders defending one of their own. The heat was a nightmare even after that. Without adequate cooling equipment, the temperature remained between 95 and 110 degrees for the most of the filming period. The young actors had to fight fatigue and dehydration while performing poignant sequences. Although the picture had a claustrophobic effect due to the heat, Tom Del Ruth subsequently acknowledged that the risk was so genuine that the assistant directors had to jolt people awake between takes. It demonstrated the extent to which the production was prepared to sacrifice the cast's health in order to create atmosphere. Despite being hailed as a classic, The Breakfast Club's legacy has grown much more nuanced in recent years. Its lack of diversity is one of the most contentious topics. Critics now refer to the story's exclusive focus on white suburban students as a whitewashed view of American high school life. Molly Ringwald herself referred to the film as racist and sexist during its 40th anniversary in 2025, claiming that it was about 4 white children in a white suburb. Hollywood was taken aback by her direct statement, particularly because it was delivered at a session celebrating the cast reunion, where she publicly disassociated herself with the role that made her famous. Scholars of film have noted that John Hughes portrayed what he saw as diversity. In actuality, however, it was really a white middle-class rendition, with the main distinction between the characters being their social group. Minority pupils were entirely excluded, despite the fact that they faced significantly more difficult obstacles in the actual world. The way that John Bender treats Claire Standish is another major issue that the movie brings up. What many viewers used to dismiss as adolescent flirtation is now understood to be harassment. In at least 5 different instances during the film, Bender verbally abuses Claire, primarily regarding her sexual life. He even dives beneath a table at one point and peers up her skirt without her permission. He keeps referring to her by names like Cherry, Sweets, and Queenie, transforming her from a person into an object. The narrative normalizes his actions, which exacerbates the situation. His persistent pestering seems normal at the end of the movie. Furthermore, it results in a love relationship between the two, which is much more concerning. Despite his violent actions, he takes advantage of Claire's fears about her father to draw her closer. In retrospect, it illustrates how male violence was frequently viewed as attractive rather than harmful in the 1980s. Another example of how the movie handled delicate subjects poorly is Allison Reynolds' The So-Called Basket Case. Critics claim that her character's emotional outbursts, muttering, and nail-biting reinforce negative perceptions about mental health. According to some analysts, Allison was intended to be a queer-coded character, but rather than being embraced for who she is, her peculiarities are viewed as a problem that needs to be resolved. Later on, actress Ali Sheedy acknowledged that she was uneasy with how her character was treated, particularly in the final makeover sequence. Allison's appearance and behavior are drastically altered in that moment in order to blend in. Allison must give up her individuality in order to be accepted, but the other characters are free to develop without altering who they are. This notion that one must erase one's differences in order to fit in is similar to how mental health and neurodivergence were frequently handled in the 1980s. Despite Hughes' stated goal of dismantling social barriers in high school, The film ultimately serves to reinforce the very preconceptions it purports to question. The jock, the princess, the brain, the criminal, and the basket case are the characters' first appearances. They remain trapped in those positions at the end. In reality, nothing is altered by the romantic relationships between Andrew and Allison or Bender and Claire. According to academics, these connections are only quick cuts that make the narrative appear promising without addressing the underlying issues. In actuality, Bender continues to act rebelliously. Claire maintains her popularity, and Allison needs to undergo a radical transformation. In the end, the message conveys that kids who wish to be accepted must adopt a version of their stereotype. Notwithstanding these problems, the movie's influence on culture cannot be denied. It joined a list of just 750 films selected for preservation by the Library of Congress when it was admitted to the National Film Registry on December 14, 2016. The Breakfast Club made the criteria after just 31 years, although normally movies had to be at least 10 years old to be eligible. According to the registry, the movie accurately portrayed the social dynamics and anxiety of teenagers in a manner that audiences continue to find compelling. It was preserved in part because the original 35 Mimi-Beeson Hidimai prints was degrading more quickly than anticipated, necessitating its preservation before it was too late. In the years that followed, its notoriety only increased. On their list of the 500 best films ever made, Empire magazine placed it at number 369 in 2008. It made one of the largest jumps in the history of the list in 2014, rising an incredible 331 positions to number 38. The fact that a new generation of critics, many of whom had grown up seeing the movie, were now casting ballots was a major factor in that shift. The survey was completed by more than 10,000 readers in 60 countries. The film even surpassed The Third Man at number 44, and some people thought it was hot at number 41. It demonstrated how cultural influence can occasionally triumph over conventional critical analysis. Scholars were taken aback when German cinema expert Dr. Björn Sonnenberg-Schrank made the startling comparison between The Breakfast Club and Citizen Kane in 2012. His research demonstrated Hughes' use of sophisticated narrative devices typically found in art films. He remarked that the monologues reminded him of Bergman's chamber dramas and that the real-time format was reminiscent of Hitchcock's Rope, and how Robert Altman's writing was reflected in the social class themes. The findings from his research may have been the most unexpected aspect. The Breakfast Club has received 34% more citations in scholarly works since 1985 than any other teen movie. Later, in 2018, a UCLA study commissioned by the American Film Institute revealed that the film outperformed 67% of the films on AFI Top 100 list in terms of technical innovation, cultural effect, and narrative sophistication. This compelled critics to reevaluate their evaluations of teen films in light of more established genres.